Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, Sergeant's Talk TV, in your face.
Right in it.
That's right. Hey guys, Jason and I and our families and the family and everybody else left their computer on and their sound, and I didn't check that. Shame on me. There we go. But anyway, we were at the 10 Killer meetup. Okay, Lake 10 Killer this last weekend. We enjoyed the rain. We enjoyed the wind. We enjoyed the rain. We enjoyed the wind.
I'm starting to think that part of Oklahoma has a very common theme in its lifestyle. And there's rain.
It was rain and wind.
The one
good thing was that we were on the edge of the tornado belt. Okay.
Yes.
The east side of that storm that went up through Texas, through Oklahoma, that basically destroyed the city of Sulphur, Oklahoma. And prayers go out to our friends and YouTube creators that live down there. And everybody else, of course. Our prayers go out to them. It was devastating what happened. And in fact, wasn't it 2 tornadoes that hit there? Yes, 2 tornadoes hit there, not at the same time, but they got a double whammy of it. And then there was a total of 17 tornadoes in Oklahoma on that storm. 17 tornadoes. So prayers out to everybody that is suffered from that storm. We were blessed up there. We got wind, we got rain, and no tornadic activity where we were. Because we were all in trailers. We'd have been playing the Wizard of Oz. We'd been in the middle of the lake.
I think it was one of those. Some of us were lucky to be in trailers, though.
Yeah.
Because, well, as Glenn and Shannon,
the ground campers,
the tent killer meetup. Yeah, it was
tent killer.
It was definitely, and I noticed because we camped down a little bit further than where the meetup site was. We were down the road, but it put us way more open.
Yeah.
And the wind blew from one direction until the storm hit. And when it was storming and raining, it would blow from the other direction. But it was always blowing. And you just knew that, it must be storming now because it's coming from the other side.
Exactly. And, and then we had a good friend of ours, Josh at Sherman Family Farms. They had damage, and that's his story to tell. But there is a GoFundMe for him. He's a dear friend of ours. So if you go over to No Judgment Here with Tish Ross, the podcast.
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry. She doesn't have a GoFundMe.
It's not a GoFundMe.
Oh.
Thing that you can make donations.
Okay.
She put.
I was corrected by our producer that she has a ways that you can contribute to help the family out, but it is located on her page. If you go to her community page, it's posted in there. I know I've seen it.
And she does have the links. If you go to Josh's page at Sherman Family Farms, he does have, I think there's 3 different kind of monetary, Cash App, Venmo, PayPal.
Well,
I think.
I thought I seen her in here. Yeah, here she is. Okay.
Yeah. She had done an update video where she's got some going there, but then if you want to go direct. And the other part is guys, if you can't send money itself, then just go to his channel and watch it.
Yeah, exactly. So Tish, I made you a moderator. If you want to put in any information for us to help out everybody in the chat, to help that family out, I'd appreciate it. So there you go. And another person I wanted to make a mod was our favorite VA nurse, Angie.
Angie.
Okay. She heard that so much this weekend. Oh my
And I don't
God.
think there wasn't a time that it was said or sung
Yeah.
that her face didn't turn red, and then she just gets the permagrin. Like her cheeks have to hurt today.
Yeah.
With, like for the last 2-3 days, just permagrin of
Yeah. So, guys, that's what we did this weekend. We had the YouTube meetup on Lake Tenkiller. Absolutely awesome time with some awesome people. But tonight, we're going to talk about PTSD, and that's post traumatic stress disorder. And that is suffered by not just military people, but millions of people around the world. In the United States, I mean, millions of people suffer from that. And it just doesn't come from war. It comes from, like the word says, traumatic activities that's in your life, experiences. It can be from an abusive relationship to a car wreck to falling off on your bike and banging your head, or just anything that the brain can't handle can fall into that category. But before we get into that, we want to say hello to everybody in the chat. We had a bunch of our friends from Turkey, the Philippines, Brazil, Singapore, Malaysia, because they're all waking up, or when they posted, before they went to bed, they made sure they came in and liked it and stuff like that. So they should be back. But anyway, let's see who got in the chat. I see
where do we
James Hall.
start? I'm gonna be safe tonight. I'm gonna take the safe card, and I'm just staying at the bottom of the chat. If I scroll up, I don't know where I'm gonna end up. So
okay. Let's see.
But I do see.
Is
Thank you for that, James
is it
Hall.
Tarot Destroyer? Yeah, Tarot Destroyer's in here. Butler Family Farms here.
There's Rainy Ridge.
Lynn the Oki's here. Got to see Lynn the Oki this weekend. And there she is. Angie. Angie.
Got our pay man there. David Moffat's in here.
David
Make sure everybody gets their checks.
Yep. Karen Brest is in here. Rainy Ridge.
We had mentioned her, but we have to still say hello to Tish and No Judgment here with Tish Ross.
That's right. She will be one of our awesome moderators one day. There's Debbie Droth.
And I see a Deb says hi from Wisconsin.
All right. Glinda Bendel. Webb's Webb. There he is.
And of course, we can't forget our favorite Tasmanian.
That's right.
Radio Jonesy on tour.
That's right. There's Judy Herman. She's in here. Wandering Gypsy Vanner's in here.
Well, and you talk about gypsies, I see Randall from Gypsy's Trails.
There you go. Our Cabin in the Woods, Tony's in here.
I'm seeing Ginger from Not For Nothing Homesteads popped in.
Glenn and
Glad they made it home safe to Georgia.
And there's Dot Roper.
Hello, Dot.
Rebecca by Yarn.
There's Rebecca. I'm sure Ronald's in the background, listening, peeping in.
LJ Rose channel's in here. All right, so I got all the way from the middle to the top.
Daniel Kearney, he's coming from San Antonio this week. He must be a traveler. And who did I see? I don't know who I seen. I evidently talked too much this
There's
weekend.
Ginger Snap. Not for nothing. Oh, I had fun with her. She was they all were busy this weekend. Every one of those people that put this on were busy. What's that?
Jason and Tara.
Oh, Jason and Tara. Yeah, they were part of the sponsorship crew.
Oh, I see Ginger Snap's other half of Mr. Joe Fix It For You.
All right, Joe's
And
there.
I'll tell you one thing about Joey. I mean, they're amazing. And this meetup was the first time, even though we've communicated, we do our whole week lives with them. The first time we got to meet Joey and Ginger in person for Tara and I. And it was awesome. But Joe was always right there to fix whatever needed fixed.
Man, I walked over there. I was live, and I walked over there, and they had the golf cart on the side, and right dead in the middle was Drew from Drew's Lens, and Joe Fix It For You out of Georgia, and then over there giving advice from above was working with Wiley. So we had the three master mechanics all knee deep in a golf cart trying to get it to work right.
Yeah, I mean, I think they even got hard enough that they had to pull some other Army brethren in there and got Gary from Junk to Gems in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I at that point I was kind of glad. Like, I don't know what footage will make our video because I just kind of randomly set our GoPro on the table and was trying to watch to see what shenanigans they were going to come up with. Yeah.
So Jason was just standing around.
It was a hard job to do. Somebody had to do it. No, everyone else kept walking. I'm like, let me just stand here in one spot and make everybody come to me, and it sort of worked.
I will tell you that I sat and enjoyed myself, and I had a little PTSD knowing everything that we did last year. Yeah, but we were so appreciative of the people that came and supported us, and this year also everybody pitched in. Everybody.
Yeah, I mean there was channels that weren't even on the committee that were like, what can I do? What can I, but that's our community. This group of YouTubers, everybody that showed up is all about helping everybody. So
that's right. There's Jennifer Ocean Homestead. And I kind of really like those community meals where everybody brings a little bit of everything.
The potluck deal, yeah.
I could do that breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, we tried to put a list out of, like, hey, put on this list of what you're gonna, and it sort of kind of not really worked. So it was just like, bring something.
But in the end, everybody brought something.
They did.
Yeah,
and
we had 2 Blackstones going, and we were Tony and Angie over on that other grill. I was on our Blackstone, and I was pretty shocked that Angie allowed Tony to cook on the grill.
Well, hold on.
He does the cooking.
We talk about grilling now, and I remember there's a certain fella, and he's my amazing battle buddy in this, that said, well, I just build them, I put them together, and then I don't do any of the cooking and grilling. But I'm pretty sure I got video evidence that old Big Mike can throw out eggs on the grill.
Terry, how I want to say it, passed the baton, if you will, to this fat guy, and I picked up a spatula and I was clinging that thing, clink, 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 chop, chop, chop. But she helped me. She was cracking eggs, and I mean, she cracked eggs. She had to wash them all because everybody from their homesteaders all brought farm eggs, and she had to wash all the eggs. Who was helping you?
I had different people.
Different people were helping her wash eggs, and we got all that done. She was just cracking. Here's another dozen. Here's another dozen. Here's another dozen.
Well, I think, because I think if I remember, it was 10 or 12 dozen that Eric from Tilted K Homestead brought.
Yeah, we sent him home with one carton of eggs. Yeah. So, and he made a point. Hey, I know, but I really like all these cartons back. They're a hot commodity. I said, I got you.
Well, that was Tara. We had brought the sourdough starter, but she's like, "Well, have your container because I kind of want the mason jar back." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Babe, it's one mason jar or two, whatever. Like, just we can get more. It's okay." But
Well, I'll tell you, there's a place on the interwebs. I can't remember where we went, but it is like a 3-foot bag of egg cartons for dirt cheap.
Mm.
And we bought some last year, and we still got them. And people give me my egg cartons back and stuff like that, but I couldn't believe they're extra large egg cartons, and they were dirt cheap. You can find anything on Amazon, I'll tell you that.
yeah, right. I do see.
Hey, there's Neil S.
And I see Backroads Homesteading.
Yep.
Ryan and Jess over there made it in.
MT Homestead's in here.
There's
I'm going to tell you something. I
amazing
really, really enjoy watching MT Homestead. Those two, man, that guy, he is hilarious. Gosh, I know he's got a touch of PTSD somewhere.
I think it might be from like his wife is like, "Hey, go do something. Just leave me alone. Like work outside and don't come in till the lights are off."
Yeah, and then make sure the camera is always rolling in case not if you hurt yourself, when you hurt yourself. So there you go. Anyway. Hey, we got back, and Terry went out there to get the eggs, and she had a freaking hen house full of eggs, right? And she went out there, and she found a friend, and he had already sucked down one egg. And she goes, "Wait a minute, that's the same snake that I took out the other day." See, Terry walked the snake away. He knows his way back.
Oh, yeah.
He's a snake in the grass. And he was in there having egg breakfast and thinking nobody's coming out.
Yeah, you guys went on vacation and he just found a smorgasbord.
There you go. Yeah. So, okay. Hey, I'm glad you guys are in here tonight. Hey, tonight we're going to be talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I just want to first state that somebody once told me that PTSD is in the brain of the beholder. And I'm going, first time I heard that, I'm going, what? And when the doc or the PhD was explaining it to us, it made perfect sense, because certain things trigger certain things for certain people, if you will. Not everybody reacts or has a reaction to what's traumatic to one may not be traumatic to the other person.
Right.
Okay. It's how your brain deals with the aftermath of what you saw, what you did, or what happened to you. And I go, wow. And he goes, that's it in a nutshell. Okay. Now, there is instances where you will be in an accident and the damage to your brain is severe. And then there'll be times where you will, counseling will help you. Okay. And I want to say it's kind of like a broken marriage, your brain and yourself. And, in a broken marriage, people say, oh, we can fix this. No, you can't, because you're the ones who broke it. Okay. You need that person. You need that medical, that psychologist, that person that can help you and guide you uh, back to somewhat being normal, if you will. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, Jason, but sometimes you just can't do it on your own.
Honestly, I think that that's perfectly said right there. Is the hard part for us, being stubborn military vets, doing all these things. We're like, hey, we went overseas, we came back, we had all our digits, we survived, and I find it more in the ones that didn't, like suffer a direct injury overseas. I mean, obviously, if they come back and they had limb loss or anything like that, then all right, but is you need somebody else to help you get through that. But our stubbornness, I mean, partly as vets, and I mean, in our case, more of just man pride
Yeah.
is I've got this. You don't cry in front of nobody, you don't do this, and all these stereotypical things that we try to live up to. uh, um and so, and I think that that's a big basis for us starting this channel, and why we do it is to show you that you can still conduct an everyday life and still have issues and know that you need somebody. Because I'll tell you firsthand, if I get in an environment where there's a whole lot of people and they're moving around, like my wife is the only reason that I can, and I see it more times like in a store, in a closed building area.
Yeah.
I just literally have to grab onto my wife, and she knows that minute that I, grab onto her, and she's like, all right, like it doesn't take any words, nothing. She knows. She just exit stage left. Let's get to the checkout. Let's get out of here. Let's, because at that point it's a shutdown mechanism for me because I'll just be overstimulated. Um, and it kind of took us a little while to figure that out, even though we're married. And she's like, but I've only noticed you do this. And I'm like, and I was kind of too proud to tell her. I was just kind of one of those, we're fine. We'll just keep going. And I just keep kind of holding on to her as we're going through the store or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And finally it was one of those that I'm like, this is silly. Why hold this in? Like, this is my wife, my best friend,
Yeah.
and I need to let her know that, hey, this is why. This is a trigger. This is an issue. But it's so hard for us as men, but then even harder as veterans, to admit we even have a fault or we
Yeah.
have an issue. And to be able to recognize that one, and obviously several counseling sessions later, at the VA clinic, but it's just one of those things that you've got to know, hey, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And when somebody knows it, but trying to do it alone is the hardest thing ever.
Yeah.
And that's what we typically do, right? Is, hey, just leave me alone. Let me go in my hole. Let me go over here. But that you're not fixing it. You're just distracting yourself with something else.
Right.
Um,
I'll
so
tell you that, um, it's a lonely ride, but back when I can only speak to back in Desert Storm, um, that the Army used to, we sat down on our steel pots, our Kevlars, um, and they told us, chaplain came out and was telling us about going home. He said, "You're not in charge. You need to blend yourself back into the family, and make sure you kiss your dog and don't hit your kids." And everybody started laughing, and he left it at that. That was our whole redeployment briefing. Okay. Um, and now, I was with uh, 4th Infantry Division. I worked over there on Fort Carson as a civilian, and I was sitting at a table in one of the many chow halls they have on that base, because they got 54,000 people that come to work on that base every day. And there was all these civilians sitting over there, and I was listening to them talk, and they were all counselors, because one of the brigades had just got back. I think it was 3rd Brigade, 4th ID, just got back from deployment, and they were having lunch and stuff, and they were talking about they were there to set up this new program where every single person has to be seen prior to deployment and post deployment. Okay. Because old codgers like me, hey, if you need help, there's a doc over here. We would never go see him because we thought we'd get earmarked. Okay. And that would hurt our chances within the organization for promotion and stuff like that. These kids now are coming in, and it's getting drilled into their head. If you need help, ask for help. If you even think you need help, and they do. They are changing the culture on the way things are being done now, and being taken care of. Is it sometimes at an advantage? Sure. For the person who doesn't want to deploy, yeah, there's people that will pull the the card, and I can't deploy and stuff like that. Sure, there is. There's always been those people, but the fact that it is more readily available now than it was in the past is just tells you how much concern they have with PTSD. I mean,
well, and I remember, so I don't remember so much like in 2003 when we went to Iraq the first time, at least for me the first time, was there really wasn't a whole lot about the whole PTSD or even TBI or anything. And there is a difference between the
yes.
TBI, traumatic brain injury, and PTSD.
Yes.
And, but then my next 2 deployments to Afghanistan, the one in 2008 and then in 2012, yeah, they did those same things. There was an evaluation before, and then you did an evaluation afterwards. And it was an initial screening, and they weren't like sit down. It was, you sat down and did like a reaction test type thing. It was like a multifaceted, just to see, like, did your reaction times, like things that you don't want to willingly admit. And I think that was the hardest part, was there was guys even from Iraq that suffered PTSD, and even all of the conflicts beforehand, that had PTSD. And the stigma with it was, if you got put as a PTSD patient, right, you got tagged as PTSD, well, then it made you non-deployable.
Yeah.
Well, what is our ultimate job, no matter what your individual MOS is, and what, whether you were the cook, the supply guy, the pay guy, or the infantryman, our ultimate job at the end of the day, we knew we signed up, was to deploy, to go overseas, or in one way, shape, or form protect our country and our rights and privileges here. And if they take that away from you, then why? Like, you've just taken everything they could.
What's going on? There we are. Are we back?
I think we're back.
Well, we took a little trip, man.
We did. I was like,
little trip with me.
Yeah, so it was, the stigma that went with it made everybody not want to say anything, until they were getting out and they were ready to do their VA claim, because there was no alternative to it. It was, you were no longer able to go to any kind of weapons or demolition training or anything.
Exactly.
And you couldn't, even if it was uh, what am I trying to think? Like, even if you stayed stateside and went training, like we would go out to CAX at 29 Palms um, for a month just for unit training as a pre-deployment or just a regular annual
Yeah,
training.
train up. Yeah.
You couldn't do any of that stuff because they're like, well, you can't hold a weapon, you can't have a K-bar, you can't, be around any ordnance. And so nobody would claim it. And then you have guys that have accidents because they have it. So, I'm super glad if they're actually going through and legitimately diagnosing these guys, but yet letting them still do their job. Like, understand that they're gonna have PTSD moment, but it doesn't mean they're gonna. And I know this probably won't go over well, but they're not gonna go postal everywhere, right?
Right.
In because that's not everybody. I see guys that have PTSD and they were normal functioning people, and it could be a little sound, it could be whatever, a sight, a smell, and it'll kind of freeze them for a minute, but then they've worked through their own ways to kind of continue.
Oh yeah, and Glenda's absolutely correct there on Grayson Fire's comment. I've known people that um, they've had mental blindness.
Mm.
I've had seen people that lose the dexterity and stuff like that. The ability to they're fully awake and their legs aren't working. I mean, there's a lot. I'm not a doctor, nor do I claim to be. I just know from experience watching other people, other soldiers, people on the battlefield, watching people get injured. I mean, look, when we went into um, Desert Storm, we went into uh, before we LD'd, before we crossed the line of departure, we had already killed 149 soldiers in accidents in the staging areas.
Hmm.
Okay. On top of that, many, many others. I had a gentleman that was a signal guy, and he would always jump from track to track from the top. And the rule on a track vehicles is you always have 3 points of contact.
Yep.
So every time I see him, I'd be screaming. I said, "Stop!" He goes, "Well, I can get to these antenna stuff and do this stuff a lot quicker than getting down and going over to the other vehicle. I can just drop through the hatch, load up the Singars and all that kind of stuff, and then it's a lot quicker." I said, "You're going to hurt yourself." And I was at breakfast one morning over on the MKT mobile kitchen trailer. And I was walking back, enjoying a nice cup of coffee, watching the sunrise over no trees whatsoever. And someone came running up there and they said, Campbell's down. I said, "What?" Campbell was my commo guy. He was in my platoon as we deployed. And I said, "What are you talking about?" Yeah, he tried to jump over to one of the track vehicles, and it was the spacing was too far apart. And on the side of the track, the top and the side, the middle of his heel caught on the side, and he fell backwards. And he wasn't wearing his Kevlar, and I've told him a million times not to do it. Hit the back of his head on the antenna mount that surrounds the base of the antenna. And yeah, he's still with us, but he's not. And I think about him all the time, and how mad I'm still at him for taking shortcuts. Let's put it that way, from taking shortcuts.
And I think that's a big key right there is what's caused, at least what I witnessed most of the time, was the non-combat related, even though you're in a combat zone or you're
Right.
even stateside when you're just training. was the taking shortcuts. And
Yeah.
it drove me crazy. Like my Marines, when I finally got to a position where I was the one in charge and leadership was, and I would listen to their ideas and I would tell them, hey, if you have a better way that you think you can do this, then bring it to me. Like I'm gonna listen to you. Because they're a younger generation, and sometimes it's just like, well, can I do this the easy way? Well, no, life ain't easy. Like we
No.
don't want the easy way, but if you can come to me with a justified and an accurate, and you can prove this that it's a better way, then I'll go through the steps to be able to change that procedure. Until then, you're going to do it the way the book says to do it,
Yeah.
and because shortcuts killed all of them: Marines, sailors, soldiers,
Yeah.
everyone. Like you're trying to do it quick, you're not paying attention, and
Yeah. It's
and I
absolutely
think some of the closest experience I had was I was the maintenance chief, but I didn't deploy with them because I was new to the battalion, and there was a whole lot of things involved of why I didn't go.
yeah.
But I sent all my other guys. I was the only one left from my platoon back, um, and I sent them over there. Well, then I got a notice that one of my Marines, uh, who was a crewman, had died. But then one of my mechanics was getting shipped off because he was crushed, and I started getting, because they're in Afghanistan and I'm back stateside, and I kept getting all this conflicted word of what was going on. And they're like, well, we're charging this other guy. Like he's the one at fault. You sent him there as a senior mechanic, so he's at fault. And I'm like, well, hold on. One, we're stateside. We don't have all the information. Like we have to wait till the investigation in country comes back. And come to find out, it was because one of my mechanics that I entrusted, not the guy they were trying to charge. They were going to let him go because he had so many injuries. I mean, he broke his back,
Yeah.
and but he killed another Marine, and it was because they were trying to do a shortcut. They were trying to work fast, and so when I got that information in finally, and it took us multiple years, honestly, to get this other guy that they did charge, and he lost rank, and we got it back for him eventually, but it was one of those that we've got to do things by the book, guys. Like there's no shortcuts because shortcuts
Yeah.
end life. And and I instill that in a lot of my life as a whole because I've watched Marines witness it, and we talk about PTSD. Well, when my Marine came back, and he knew he did wrong, and he knew that it was on his conscience that Marine died. Trying to help him do it the wrong way. That guy was messed up 7 ways from Sunday.
Yeah.
He was in bad shape. And, I talked to him and I went through all of what they had said in the investigation and what had happened. And he had finally admitted, but it was hard for him to do it. But I literally had to move that guy into my house because he was a single Marine. And they're like, well, just put him in the barracks and give him a roommate and make the roommate watch him. And I'm like, that's not the answer.
Yeah.
How do
Well,
they?
and that, accidents happen because people take risk. Now, in PTSD, what I learned and what I was taught to look out for with my soldiers and stuff like that were the risk that they were taking once they've redeployed. Okay. Asking them, hey, what are you doing this weekend? So on and so forth, being part of their lives, knowing, hey, you take an interest in what they're doing, but really you're trying to find out those destructive things or those risks that they're taking, because a lot of people may not understand is the Army hired a bunch of smart PhDs, and they came out and they were teaching us. And being a soldier lives on a bell curve. Okay, lives on a bell curve, and when they're over here and it's nice and flat, they're in the garrison doing their garrison thing and doing training and going into the range and stuff like that. And then they get their deployment orders. And when they get their deployment orders, they start going up the side of the bell. Okay. You got force on force training, you got all this kind of stuff. And then you get into the actual deployment part, and now you're climbing the bell. All right. Then you get into country, right? And then you get to the top of the bell and you've established base camps. You've done everything you needed to do, get there, and you're going on your first mission. And that's where you stay in combat. Okay. You go on your first mission. You're kicking down doors. You're a gunner on a Hummer, up armored Humvee. You're the Mark 19 guy. You're ready. You're rocking and rolling, and then all of a sudden something happens, and you go from being nervous, like a cat on a hot tin roof, to just, I mean, sorry, balls to the wall, freaked out. And first of all, you're trying to ascertain which direction it's coming from, or who got hit by the roadside bomb, or who flipped over in their Hummer, or whatever happened. And your adrenaline is busting through your eyeballs. You are so stoked and so hopped up. And people don't understand that you either get terrified or you live for that adrenaline rush. And it might sound stupid, but it's true. I had they volunteered every time we went outside the compound. They wanted to go. And those are the guys you have to pay attention to. Okay.
Well, and I think the easy comparison to that, because you talk about being at the top of the bell, right? That's the time you're in country. That's when you're in conflict and you're having the combat operations. You're doing that. That time at the top of the bell is the easiest time that you'll ever serve in any conflict whatsoever, because you only have one thing on your mind, and that's survival. Whether it's, and your natural instincts have to kick in. It involves no thinking at that point. Like you wondered why you did all these repetitive training drills
right
prior to going to the deployment, because the effect of the human brain that says, okay, I'm in fight or flight mode, what am I going to do? And unless you train that fight or flight mode to know that, hey, I need to fight because the option isn't flight. I can't just run away from this situation. And I've said it a lot of times with a lot of different veterans, especially, Marines that I deployed with that struggled from deployments, is being on a deployment in the most hostile combat environment has been the easiest time ever that I whole served in the entire Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And if you ask a lot of vets, they're going to tell you the same thing, because you don't have to think. All you have to do is react and conduct yourself, and you're on autopilot. Like it's literally, your brain is the quietest. You don't have time to think about anything outside of it. You don't have time to look at those pictures of family or the letters that your wife and kids wrote you or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
You're literally just your tunnel vision, in necessarily kind of a good way, right? We talk about that 1,000-yard stare. These guys came back and they didn't know. Like, I'm not talking about that kind of tunnel vision. I'm talking about, I'm just focused on that mission. And you don't have to think.
Yeah.
As long as you did the training. And I think that that's where the emphasis is. It starts in the core, the bases. A lot of the guys that I've seen struggle with like PTSD symptoms were guys that literally got out of boot camp and within months they were shipped overseas. They had no stateside training, nothing to kind of acclimate themselves to it. But I'll tell you, Iraq in 2003 shocked me. We had an individual that he was supposed to be the best of the best. Obviously I'm not going to release a name or anything, but I'll say he was a gunnery sergeant. An E7 in the Marine Corps, and he was our weapons tactical expert and our first legitimate engagement in a firefight where he should have been setting Marines in positions for defensive stuff. This
Yeah.
dude was curled up in a ball down in a tank ditch, hugging the machine gun, like not doing anything.
Yeah.
And like I stood there looking at him on the ground, and I'm like, "Hey, aren't you supposed to be telling us what to do? Like, why am I the one?" You know. And there was others that were doing it. It wasn't just me, but it was one of those that if that effective training didn't hit, you know, and it's kind of that time that you, but that bell curve, like you talk about, and you know, it's funny because I haven't heard this for so long, so to hear it now, I'm like, oh my gosh, all these memories of hearing about this, but it makes sense now.
Yeah.
Um, that is a time your brain doesn't have to think.
And it's kind of scary that when we first got into country and we were moving around, um, everybody wanted to go out on a mission until they came back, and they've ate so much sand and dirt, and you had dust boogies. You know what those are.
Yep.
And I mean, people got bored. People got bored because there was no chance of anything happening other than an accident. If you were out on a convoy and you're practicing your TTPs and stuff like that, techniques, tactics, and procedures. So yeah, and then when you actually got into the shit, um, when bullets were flying, or you were in a hot area, or in a town, and you didn't know which way was up or where the enemy was going to come from, or how did they hide a roadside bomb this week. It's You're on edge to the point where when you come in from just driving, okay, you're exhausted because you are so wound up the whole time, and people eat that stuff up.
Oh yeah.
They were volunteering to go back out because being back at base camp was boring. Okay. Because they had every stupid thing for you to do, details, whatever, okay, to do back in the rear with the gear. And you wanted to get out there where the shit was. And those are the guys that beg to go out. I seen people pay other people to take their shift on a convoy. And that is the scary part. Those are some of the trigger points where when you have soldiers and stuff like that. And it's the same thing. Let's look at it this way. A NASCAR driver, all right? Let's take Dale Jr. Dale Jr., I mean, he was pushing it to the limits until he had his first accident. And I mean his first major accident. And Dale Jr. was never the same again.
Right.
Okay? Because it affected him. He wasn't driving. He wasn't the risk taker. I can't die. I'm young. I'm dumb. And I'm hitting the gun. And it is just, soldiers are the same way. Your teenagers are the same way. Why are they taking these risks? Okay. And that's what I wanted to tell people is there are trigger points to PTSD to watch out for. Okay. When a soldier's enjoying something so much, it's time to rein them back and put them in the base camp. Okay. Because I know when you're hopped up on adrenaline, you're paying attention, at least. But if you're out there for the fun of it, waiting to pull that trigger, now it's time to reel them back in. So, one of the other things that we see in people with PTSD is severe nightmares where they're reliving an instance, or doesn't really have to be an instance. It can be an environment. Let's put it that way. They're back in the environment that they feared the most. and nightmares recreate that whole scenario that triggered you into this way of feeling. One of the things that I never, from every deployment that I've been on, I've never dreamed about it again. I don't know if
No.
I blocked it out. I don't dream about stuff, but there are some people that do, and they're so realistic it drives them crazy to relive whatever that was that their brain could not process. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and I think you had hit it a little bit earlier was, you can have two guys, they're in the same Humvee, right? Or, truck, whatever it is, they're going through the exact same experience. One of them is going to come out of it and he's going to have nightmares and he's going to have dreams and he's, all those things that are your typical symptoms.
yeah,
And the other guy's going to come back and he's like, man, whatever, and move on. And I think that's, as they've told us anyways, neither one of us are doctors to be able to know
yeah,
the clinical reason. But I think honestly, I don't think the doctors know either because it's such an indifference of everybody's brain works differently. Your basic
sure,
functions from the
sure,
same. And I think that it's, that chemical imbalance of why, and I've asked myself a lot over the years, to where I was right next to all these guys that I'm watching get diagnosed and discharged from the military for PTSD, and they're having nightmares. And I would talk to them, and they're like, "Dude, don't you remember this?" And I'm like, "No," and Tara tells me all the time because with her being a nurse, right, whether I like it or not, she's always medically evaluating me of what's going on, and we hold a little bit of fear for later on in my life. Is all this stuff going to come rushing back to my brain, and am I going to have them issues?
yeah,
And I have a higher level of confidence than most in the fact that I don't think it's going to come back. Like, I've tried to trigger some of the memories because I wanted to have conversations about them, and I'm like, I was there, I did this, but I can't give you details of what happened.
yeah,
um and so there's a worry that it's going to come back because that's the other part with this PTSD and any kind of mental disorder that they give any of the vets, or even not even just vets, but the family members. As I see a lot of these comments coming in to where they never served, but then, their dad came home and wouldn't talk about it, but then he reacted a certain way. And then it caused the rest of the generations, his children to be able to react that way because that's how he was.
sure,
Um, and obviously, we see it right primarily with the Vietnam vets.
yeah,
Vietnam was a nasty place to be in, and to go there, but kind of going back to where two different people are gonna experience the same thing, but their reaction to it's gonna be different, and
yeah,
some of those reactions may come later in life. I've never once dreamt about any of my deployments,
yeah,
and I've tried. I honestly have because I've wanted to remember certain things. Um, because I know that they were significant events that happened in my life that I want to remember those details. Not for a masochist reason, right? Not for some sort of psychotic reason, but because I would like to know those details. But my brain is one of those that there's literally like a switch. And if it says, hey, this was a bad traumatic event, I'm gonna shut it off, and I don't want to. And
sure,
sometimes it's aggravating. Like, I don't have, and I'm willing to put it out there, to everybody. Like, I do not have a diagnosis of PTSD on all of my VA claims. Like, I do not qualify for PTSD.
yeah,
Um, Now, do I have some minor symptoms? And I know somebody in here put it on there was like, well, I think all vets have some form of PTSD. I don't know if I think it reverts back to where we kind of started, how we were going to have this conversation this week. If you look back at last week, right, as we were talking about the reactions of um, what gets deemed like the new normal.
right,
Um, like once you've served, And especially if you've served in any kind of a combat, like now there's a new normal.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where the struggle comes is everyone wants to remember you pre-deployment or pre-military, you know. I don't remember how much I said of it last week, but you know, I remember after I retired out of the Marine Corps and I moved to my hometown, people thought I was that same 17-year-old kid that left straight out of high school and joined the Marine Corps
Yeah.
and thought my emotions and my reactions and my thought process were going to be the same. And a lot of them, like, I'm not friends with anymore because they're like, well, you're not the same. And I'm like, well, there's been 30 years of difference, you know, or at that point, I mean, maybe not 30, you know, some of them it had been 30 years of change since I'd seen them,
Right.
but even 20 years or 10 years, like we all have something different. And I'll tell you, I watch my uncle. Um, he's the one that when we did our first episode of why we joined, right? I watch him because I have a lot of similarities in him. You know, looks, personality. I joined the Marine Corps because of him. All
Yeah.
those things. And he does suffer a lot from PTSD, and anxiety and those types of things. And I'm like, I worry. I worry because I'm like, that's a lot of my genetics are the same as his, you know, and I'm like, am I going to have those same? But he can get on, and I think one of the things because I've talked to him about it, um, is he can get on his Harley, and he can ride wherever he wants all over the United States on that Harley. But
Yeah.
he's got a fairly brand new F-150 pickup truck that his wife and daughters and son-in-laws, they all enjoy driving it around, but he can't drive it. He can't
Yeah.
take a road trip other than maybe down to the corner store and back in his own pickup truck, you
Yeah.
know, that he's paying for. But he can get on that Harley, and it's that adrenaline thing. I think that adrenaline makes us numb, um, and we don't like. That's kind of where that autopilot comes in. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling,
Well,
but
I think part of that is in the next part on if you guys remember the thumbnail is the medication part that the
yeah,
VA I mean I and I get it. Medication is not a cure for anything. Okay. It's it just helps you cope with it. It doesn't cure the root cause of your PTSD or anything. You know, I remember um, two kids. They're in a Humvee, and the sergeant was up in the door, up in the crow's nest, um, on the um, saw, and vehicle just, I mean, cuts that vehicle in half. A roadside bomb just cut it in half. It was one of those before we had all the up armor, because Desert Storm, we didn't have all the up armor stuff, and it was bad. We were throwing sandbags on the floor, putting our feet
yeah,
on top of that. All that did was really sandblast your legs and rip all the meat off of them and stuff like that. But both of these guys, I mean, they got tore up from the floor up. They missed body parts and all kinds of stuff, and they both survived. Okay, they both survived, and when we got the call, we were coming in on a Black Hawk, and we came in, and all of a sudden, I seen. I think we were at the same base camp, but we coming in two different directions, and I had to fly somewhere, and I can't remember. But they came in. It was both of the soldiers from my company, and I seen them carrying them in, and we were walking over that way, and I go, "What the heck?" And I said, I recognized the one kid, um, because I didn't notice that he didn't have no legs at that time. And so I ran over there and I'm going, I'm looking at them. They're both out. They're out of it. So I got a hold of my company and I told them that I'm at the base camp, and they said we had a couple of more people coming in or whatever. And I think it happened. I don't think it was a roadside bomb. I believe that one was when we had an artillery round fall short and nailed them guys. And trust me, that does happen. Okay.
Yeah.
There's some lieutenant out there calling for fire and doesn't know how to read a map. But anyway, I'm just kidding. No, I'm not.
Unfortunately, I've said the words over the radio.
They're both getting ready. They're not in recovery, but they've stopped everything and they're getting them ready to life flight them out to take them to Landstuhl and send them to KKMC to get on a plane to go to Germany to Landstuhl Medical Hospital. And the one kid wakes up and he goes, "What the heck happened?" Right? I said, "Dude, you got hurt." He goes, "Where?" And and of course my buddy that was with me, he goes, "Take your right finger and pick your nose." He goes, "There was no right arm." He goes, "Holy crap." Right? He goes, "When did that happen?" He had no recollection of anything. And he was so doped up, he didn't even know. He couldn't tell you his name. And then but when he recovered, right, he got himself a brand new arm, and when you talk to him, he's so positive, so positive. I go, "Man, how can you be that positive when something like that happens to you?" And then the other guy is a bag of marbles. He's out of it. He's feeling sorry for himself. He wants to end his life and all kinds of stuff going on. And I'm going, holy, that you get two different reactions, from two different people. And then later in life, the guy that was happy and go lucky, that everything happened to him, took his own life. So don't judge a book by its cover. Okay. "Oh, he's okay, man. He's fine." No, they're not. Okay. Yeah. And then the other guy, he's confined to a wheelchair, but he's teaching college now, and he did something with his life. So it's not, you can't read reactions and recovery and stuff like that. Leave that to the professionals and stuff like that. The one guy that was happy and stuff, he drank himself into a suicide, but he didn't let anybody know. He was hiding it. But things like that happen because of PTSD, violence, okay, assault, family members, spouses can take some abuse. And I say spouses because it can be male and female. So there are assaults. There are going downtown drinking and fighting. And next thing you know, you wake up the next morning in the drunk tank and you're seeing the judge to be arraigned and stuff like that. And "What's wrong with you, boy?" and stuff like that. And you're not normal. But society wants you to come back and act like a normal person, okay? Or you're going to pay the consequences. And a lot of our soldiers, airmen, Marine, they come back and they pay the consequences because they don't conform back to the way society wants us to act. And that's because they're not right in the head. I can say that because I've lived that. I've had stress and stuff like that. I wouldn't say I had PTSD, but I've dealt with so many soldiers with it. And You know, when you become a platoon sergeant, I mean, good gosh, you become a marriage counselor.
Oh,
You become a dad, even if you're not. You're trying to fix their finances for them, or show them how they can fix it. I mean, you're doing all these things, you know. So when you go to combat, you pretty much know your soldiers.
yeah.
Okay, you know Scruffy McScrufferson over there, and old Dillweed over here. You know your soldiers, and so that person probably knows the soldier better than their spouse does. Okay, so and they see those changes. Back in my day, they didn't say nothing, man. Don't just shut your mouth. Don't say nothing, dude. I'm going to lose you. I'm going to lose you on the front line, or I'm going to lose you, period, out of the platoon if you keep running your mouth. But nowadays it's not like that. They're quick about saying, "Hey, I'm dorked up. I'm dorked up," and the help is there. You know, the help is there nowadays. It wasn't all the time before.
And I've been, watching some of these comments come through. Yeah, and I think PTSD is the hardest medical condition that you could handle anywhere, because there's so many different levels to it, and it's caused by different things, and the reactions to it are different things. And in my experience of dealing with guys that have the PTSD is, you know, is not pumping them full of medicine. Like they want to say that, okay, PTSD, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not a doctor, and I know that there's a lot of things out there, and they're saying, hey, it's a chemical imbalance in the brain, it's something triggering where they have an adrenaline rush, they have this, they have that. I think a lot of it is, for me personally, right? Not a doctor. There's no doctor in front of my name anywhere. Um, it's just the fact that they need somebody to talk to, that they feel confident they can talk to them and not feel diminished afterwards. Like if I came to Mike and I said, hey, man, I'm struggling. Like I can't even get through this Walmart. Like, let me hold on to your arm and you just walk me out the door and we'll be good to go. Like, most men are not going to do that.
Yeah.
There's just too much pride to know. And what's going to happen is, instead of me asking for that help, I'm going to get violent. I'm going to, cause a scene with a Walmart employee because they're going to be like, well, can you swipe your card again? No, I did it. And it's going to cause, and I think there is a chemical imbalance, right? But I think there's been more help of trying to get veterans to talk about it. And that's the hardest part. You can pump them with meds and make them comatose.
Oh yeah.
And put them in a chair in the corner and let them drool on themselves, and some of them have, like, when you get to like a TBI level, then that's the only thing that can help, is like to get them some of those medications to basically bring down that anxiety level, right? But a lot of them is they just need somebody to talk to that they're confident, that they're not going to judge them by something else. And I think that's the hardest part. Is
I don't
want to
think,
tell you what my faults are because I don't want you to judge me for them.
yeah. I don't think that statement's totally accurate. Again, I know quite a few Vietnam vets, infantrymen over my years that would not talk about stuff, but most of them were batshit crazy. Okay. And some of them that were in Vietnam that were at base camps in the middle of nowhere that took fire every night. I've listened to story after story after story. Again, whether you talk about it or not is how you deal with what you saw or what you did. Um, were there a lot of friendly fire incidences that you don't talk about? Yeah. where there are a lot of accidental, possibly killing of civilians. Yeah, that happens in war. But I think it's truly just the individual. Because I talk to my uncle all the time. I used to. And he was over there, and he talked to me about it. And I had another friend. His dad was part of a commando team between Canadians and the United States, and they're called the Black Devils. The Germans called them the Black Devils. And there's a book out there about these guys. And their job was to go behind German lines and kill officers, because the only thing that runs the German army is officers. Okay. They're so reliant on them during the war, and their job was to sneak into their base camps and cut their throats. Well, his son, this guy that was with them, is my best friend in the world. He never talked to his sons or anybody in that town at all. And both his son served, my buddy served, but he never talked to him. And then I went up there for deer camp one time, first time I met him. And we were sitting there and we were talking about stuff. And I said, "Oh, Carl tells me that you were in World War II." And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Huh." I said, "I've been all through," and I told places in Europe, and he's seen it when it was all blown up. I've been there, and so on and so forth. And he said, and we just started talking back and forth, basically soldier to soldier, back and forth. And he didn't know me. He met me that day. And all of a sudden, I look up and it's like 3:00 in the morning, and we're still talking. And the next day, I get up and Carl don't say 2 words to me, because he was in there listening to this, things his dad would never talk to him about, ever. Not one story in his entire life. And then later on, we were driving home, and he goes, "Man," "I'm sorry." He goes, "I was just pissed off. My dad, I begged him to tell me about his time in the Army and stuff, and he wouldn't do it." I said, "Maybe that was his way of protecting you, that he thought he was protecting you." And but he just told you everything. I said, "You know what? There's stories to be told. I wish I would have had a recorder just to record your pops telling me all these stories and stuff. Dude, these guys were brutal." He goes, "And half of them were freaking batshit crazy when they got back, because that's all they knew. I mean, they went from North Africa into Europe through Italy, Sicily, all that stuff, and all the way up into Germany. And they didn't ride, they walked."
Yeah.
Like going, "Are you what?" He goes, "Well, we'd catch, like a tank was going by, and we'd jump on it and stuff like that. But we had to be, not heard and not seen, because that was our mission." And I'm just going, holy smokes. And they did make a movie about these guys. I can't remember. I think it was called The Black Devils or something like that. But it was just an honor to listen to him. And he talked about it. He goes, "Man, and he was like, I guess he was in his 70s or 80s when he died. And when I was talking to him, and he just said, he goes, "Yeah, it hasn't been right up here for a long time." And so, like I say, people who talk about it and people who don't, it depends on the person. It's the same thing with PTSD.
Yeah.
PTSD, when you have it, you're probably not the most vocal, because you can't wrap your head around that. How can you sit down and talk about stuff like that? You know what I mean?
But and I think that's one of those things that, very similar to your story, but it's actually my great uncle did the same thing.
Yeah.
Him and my aunt had been married for 20 something years. And, I would go visit them because when I was in Georgia, they lived just a couple hours north of me.
Right.
So I'd go up there all the time, and I always gave him crap because he retired from the Air Force after 20 years of service in the Air Force before, like a year before I was born. And I'm like, Uncle, you're old. Like, you did 20 years in the Air Force, but I was like, but then you're Air Force. Like, what did you really do? And so my aunt, she's always like, "Oh, I'm just glad you're here. You guys can go on the front porch and have your conversation." Because I've heard every one of his stories that he could ever tell in the last, 25 years. And we were sitting out on his porch one night and we were talking about it, and I'll give it to him, like, he wasn't your typical chair force. He didn't have a chair very often. He was a communication guy, and so he was LPOPs, listening and observation post. So those are the guys that go above. They're in front of the front line, and he
Yeah.
was one of those guys. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. And he's giving me details, and he's telling me all this stuff that's going on. And she just happened to be inside the house, and I guess I didn't realize the window was opening. And she's listening to the story, and the next morning she kind of did the same thing. She's like, "How did he tell you all that?" And I'm like, "Tell me what?" She's like, "What he talked about last night." And I'm like, "Well, because I'm in the Marine Corps, he was Air Force, like, we're military." And she's like, "I've been with him for 25 years and I ain't heard not one of them stories." I said, "So you lied to me. You told me you heard all of his stories. You know it." And, kind of rasped her a little bit. But
Yeah.
that was a significant difference that I knew then was, you know, when they wanted to start sending me to go see, we call it the wizard, right? Go see a therapist. I'm like, there's no way. You're not going to send me to a therapist. I'm not going to a therapist because all he did was went to college, took a test. Great, good. And I'm not taking it away from anybody that's a therapist. But if you're a licensed clinical therapist, I won't say 100%, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to have less success with a combat vet than you are with a typical civilian that has never served combat. Because that combat vet's going to tell you just enough to get out of that office. But when you have a vet to vet conversation of somebody that hey, I was in the shit, you're in the shit. Okay, now we can talk. We have a bond. It doesn't matter what branch you served. It doesn't matter what era you served.
Yeah.
And honestly, to this day, I think it's the best therapy. Tara mostly hears most of my combat stories and what happened when I'm with other Marines, or when she's, listening in, which no, she's on the phone out there. But if she's listening in the conversations here, because it's hard. It's hard for us to tell non-veteran combat or combat veterans or just non-veterans in general. Because you get more sympathy than empathy. And
Yeah.
none of us did anything that we did wanting sympathy. And I think that that's the hardest part. But if you can get a chance, to talk to another veteran, I mean, it does wonders. I mean, there's a reason that my cell phone number hasn't changed in over 20 years. And
Yeah.
no matter if I change cell carriers, I will never change this phone number. And to this day, I still get calls from Marines that I served with 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that's the reason. I'll get a random call. They're like, "Holy crap, this number still works." And I'm like, my number will always work. No matter what happens, as long as there are phone numbers and a way to call somebody, my cell phone number will never end or never change.
Yeah.
Not this one. I've had it too long, and too many Marines know this number.
And Neil S. right there put it just great. You can train
Yes.
and train and train, and until a bullet whizzes by your head or something blows up next to you, or you're in hand-to-hand combat, or whatever the case is, you do not know how you're going to react when you hit the combat zone. You don't know. You
Right.
know, it's kind of like PTSD amongst cops. Most of these cops are walking around with PTSD. It's not that, they want to hurt somebody. They're in survival mode. in a lot of these cities and stuff like that. It's pure survival mode PTSD. You know, everybody goes, "Oh, you need to send them to class in school." But when you got something wrong with you where you're a cop and you're in survival mode 24 hours a day, you know, you could do a routine traffic stop and a gun gets pulled out. You know, you have no idea what these guys go through, but we're always so quick to chastise what they do and their methods that they use. And until you put on the blue, the green, the marine, or whatever it is, you know, to me, opinions are like, you know, senators. Everybody's got one. Okay. But you don't know what you're talking about when you talk about people that have PTSD, and cops are no different than soldiers. They go to war every freaking day. Okay. And I have the utmost respect for them and what they go through. And, you know, it's just, it is what it is. I mean, that is pretty much a thankless job nowadays. And I mean, I call cops now are, you know, the Vietnam veterans of, you know, the 2024.
Oh,
You know what I mean? It's just sad that it's like that, but it you know, that's the way society's going. Hopefully we'll turn ourselves and pull our head out of our 6 o'clock one day in America, and we'll get ourselves straight and listen to the masses instead of the few. But hey, guys, we've been on here for hour and 22 minutes. Doesn't even seem like that.
No.
And I don't even think I got through all the chat here. Hey, there's Reverend Dream. He's in here.
Yeah, and it's, you know, and I've been trying to watch some of the chat and you know, running some of that thought and it is you know, it's hard. I mean, PTSD, it's such a multi-headed monster is I guess the best way to explain it. And you know, and it's not downplaying anybody that's trying to help. You know, it's just, I guess it's a point to where like I don't want to make offense to anybody that didn't serve in combat. Like I don't want to make anybody feel any less because you're not a combat vet. Like, you know, I know that we have a lot of people in here that aren't vets at all, but they support military, they support their family, and you know, we're not by any means the end all be all answer to that. All we can give is our personal experiences of how we've handled certain situations. But I think PTSD, and I would love nothing more. Honestly, I would love nothing more if they could find, you know, a cure, solution, a better way to combat the PTSD because we lose so many people, and it's not just a combat vet. I mean, our channel's about veterans, but you know, it's not just a combat vet thing, and you know, I guess I get a little concerned because like I've seen comments where like, well, I can't say nothing. I'm not a combat vet. Well, you can because everybody's like, you get like PTSD isn't just a veteran thing.
No, it's not.
But it's, well, I guess what like how we've said it, or at least how I've said things tonight is I've seen so many frustrations from families because they're like, well, if they would just talk to me, maybe I can help them. And that's probably true, you know, but there's another side. Like I tell Tara all the time, I said, babe, I can tell you everything that I did and all these things, and I can explain it to you, but you're not going to understand. And I
Right.
think that's the hardest part. And I know we haven't talked about families a lot tonight, but I think that's the hardest part for the families is they want nothing more than to help their loved one.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what the relation is, right? As families, that's all we want to do. We want to help the loved one that we have and make them better. And sometimes there just isn't, there's not a textbook answer for that help. You know, there's not, Um, there's not an end all be all medicine or pill that we can give them. Like, just like every individual that suffers from any kind of mental illness suffers it for a different reason, the cure for that is another different reason. And I think that that's the challenge that makes. So I want to just put this out there to everybody that whether you served or not, whether you're in combat or not, or whether, that person that you wanted to help isn't here any longer, don't feel like you failed just because you can't reach them, but also know that you just trying means a lot to them. Um, I don't take away from Tara whatsoever when she's like, babe, I know you're struggling. Just talk to me about it. And I'm like, I can't. I got to call a buddy and talk to him. I was like, you can sit here. Like, I want you to hear this conversation, but I can't say it to you one on one. I have to say it to him. I have to call him to say it. And then you can hear it and then give me your analysis afterwards.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. So I just need that out there that, I know the families struggle because they feel they failed, a service member or whoever that suffered from a mental illness. Well, why didn't I help them?
Yeah.
That's not our judgment. There's a man upstairs that controls every one of our lives and says when we're going to go and how we're going to go. And we don't get to write that book. We just get to write it.
They need to up their marketing because it is suicide among soldiers is a lot higher than 22. So just understand, even if you use the number 22, and you added it up 365 times or 22 times that's a lot of people we lose every year. And can you imagine what the number is with the entire population of what everybody goes through, from
one of the latest stats that
marriages, all kinds of stuff.
One of the latest stats I got when I talked to a buddy of mine that's very involved in veterans and getting out transitions, and I mentioned the 22, and it's not, that's a very valid cause, but that number is more about 45 to 47. Yeah. It's closer to the 50 range, just because of reporting processes. We can easily remember 22, but honestly, it's closer to 50.
Yeah.
So,
and no doubt. All right. So, hey guys, thanks for coming in here. We could talk about this for another hour or more.
Probably. This is. I was a little worried of how long we were going to go, because this is very, it's a very tough subject to talk about openly to everybody else. But then, it's controversial.
One of the things is that I know that this is mental illness and PTSD has affected a lot of people who don't have PTSD, that live with somebody with PTSD, that's abused by somebody with PTSD, that had lived through the suicide of somebody with PTSD or mental illness, children who have suffered through the effects of this, watching their parents, whether abusive, whether it's yelling, screaming, hitting, disappearing. It affects everybody, not just the person. It's destroyed lives. It's destroyed marriages. It's just, innocent people have been killed because the way you deal with stuff is I suck on that bottle till I can't walk no more. All those things affect everybody. And if you could take account and say, hey, everybody, raise your hand if you've got PTSD. Then raise your hand if you're a child of somebody with PTSD. Raise your hand if you're married to somebody. raise your hand if you're related to somebody that you know's got it. I mean,
Yeah.
this whole country would have their hands up in the air because, like we said, it's just not combat causes this. Any traumatic episode that you go through can cause that. Our friend Julie, remember, she fell off the ladder. What was it, 11th ladder, and onto her face and stuff. I mean, you know, she has it. She may never get up on the ladder again. Is that a form of PTSD? Sure, it is. You know, so you know, if you've got somebody in your life, before giving up on them, read up on it, study what PTSD is all about. You know, I'm sure they didn't wish it upon themselves by no means. But you know, we really didn't have much of wars between, you know, the Vietnam War and Desert Storm, really, you know. So a younger generation, the Gulf War was the war of divorces. More military soldiers, military service members got divorced during that time frame than any time in any war. And I was reading, they were giving us all these facts and stuff like that, and that's crazy. You know, are we the greatest generation? Were they the greatest generation? You know, I think that through your patriotism, through your giving, through your understanding, you know, that's what's going to help a family get through it. So God bless those family support groups that are out there for our active military, that are trying to help hold the families together, to get the spouses involved while their soldier, airman, Marine, or sailor is deployed. So thank God for all those people. They make life a little bit tolerable in a world of shit, if I can say it that way. You know, and I've seen comments in here. We're not making light of it or anything like that, but that's what we do. We accept it, and we've been around it, and you know, I don't want anybody to ever think that we take light on it, because I'd sit here and bawl like a baby, remembering everybody that's got hurt in my life because of war, because of abuse and stuff like that. So I have to, so I don't go off the deep end, if you will. So
yeah,
and
I think
PTSD, that's it.
Yeah, and reiterating what Mike's saying is like the whole point for us right here doing this channel and what we talk about these subjects, whether they're controversial or not, might be difficult, anything like that, is, you know, just it's okay to talk about it. Like Big Mike and I are giving you permission. You can talk about it. And if you're a family member of somebody that's struggling through it, try to find another veteran. If you can't pull through to them, and you like, just find them another veteran. Like, we're not guaranteeing by any means that it's going to make it all better, but it can't hurt, you know, and it may help, just because we know our experiences and what we're doing. So,
Right.
But yeah, we appreciate y'all. I know it's 1.5 hours and everything's getting late. So, we love every one of you. We appreciate you coming in on this chat, making these comments. We might not be able to highlight every single one of them through the chat, but also share this out, right? I put some posts out today about sharing this channel, and share it out. Pick some of your closest friends that you think may need to hear some of the messages that we talk about, and send it to them directly. Text them that message. because everybody that we can reach is hopefully everybody that maybe we can save or help or just make a connection through. And yeah, that's my 2 cents, y'all, with what little voice I got left. But I love y'all.
Hey guys, thanks for coming in. Hey, be kind to one another. I'm going to say it. Help somebody in need, and always, always think of that. Okay, guys. We love you. Next week, we haven't decided what next week's going to be. Okay?
Y'all are going to be.
We've
we're
only
going to
scratched
find
the
out when you
surface.
know.
Yeah, we've only scratched the surface of mental illness, PTSD, family separation, and stuff like that. So we will make sure that the thumbnail is out on Sunday, every Sunday, so that you can see what's going on, and we'll share it out to all the avenues that we can. So hopefully you'll see it. Hey, and if you want to share us out, we welcome that too. Hopefully we can reach one more veteran, one more family member of a veteran, a child of a veteran, or just somebody that has been affected personally or indirectly by a service member. So guys, we love you, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye guys.
See you guys.
See you later, Battle Buddy.
Bye, brother.